Across the galaxy, civilizations whispered of the final stand at Kepler, 442b. They spoke of how the proud Zephyrian Empire, masters of plasma technology and stellar engineering, had fallen silent in mere hours. How the crystalline hegemony of Arcturus, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago, had simply vanished. The void swarm had consumed everything in its path for 3 standard years, leaving behind nothing but empty space where once thriving worlds had orbited their stars. The galactic council chambers, carved from a single asteroid and shielded by technology beyond most species' comprehension, had become a tomb of despair. Representatives from the surviving worlds gathered not to plan victory, but to decide how to die with dignity. The mathematical projections were undeniable. The void swarm's exponential growth meant total galactic extinction within 18 months. But in the darkest corner of that cosmic graveyard, where hope had been buried beneath the weight of inevitable doom, something unprecedented was about to happen. A species that most of the galaxy had dismissed as primitive warmongers, a young race that had barely mastered interstellar travel, was about to remind the universe of a simple truth. When everything seems lost, when despair has settled into the very fabric of reality itself, that's exactly when humans do their most dangerous work. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's children had earned their reputation as the most stubborn, reckless, and impossibly tenacious species to ever crawl out of a gravity well. They were about to discover what happens when humanity stops playing defense and decides to go to war. Commander Sarah Chun stood at the observation deck of a UES Indomitable, watching the twisted remains of what had once been the Zephyrian homeworld spin lazily through the void. The planet's surface had been stripped down to its molten core, leaving behind a skeletal framework of metal and stone that pulsed with an alien hunger. Void swarm constructs, each the size of a city block, crawled across the planetary bones like metallic parasites, harvesting the last traces of useful matter. 3 billion Zephyrians lived there last week, muttered Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez, joining her at the reinforced viewport. His weathered face reflected the orange glow of the dying world. Intelligence says the swarm converted the entire population in under 6 hours. Chen nodded grimly. The void swarm didn't just destroy civilizations. It consumed them, breaking down organic and synthetic matter alike into base components, then reconstructing those materials into more of itself. Every ship, every building, every living being became fuel for the hive mind's endless expansion. The mathematical horror of exponential growth made manifest in twisted metal and hungry algorithms. Captain Martinez wants to see you in the war room, Rodriguez continued. The last transmission from Arcturus Prime just came through the quantum relay. It's not good. The war room aboard the Indomitable buzzed with grim efficiency. Holographic displays showed the current position of swarm fleets throughout the Orion Arm, red dots spreading like a cancer across the 3-dimensional map of known space. Captain Elena Martinez, her gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun, stood before the central tactical display with the exhausted bearing of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Commander Chun, thank you for coming, Martinez said without looking up from the display. I need your assessment of the Kepler defense grid. How long can the automated systems hold the line? Chun studied the tactical readout, her enhanced neural interface processing the flood of data streaming from the defensive installations. Humanity's contribution to galactic defense had always been their knack for building things that were harder to kill than they had any right to be. The Kepler defense grid was a perfect example. A network of fortified stations, automated missile platforms, and energy barriers that could theoretically hold off a swarm incursion for months. Theoretically, 6 to 8 weeks if the swarm commits a standard probe force, Chen replied. But if they bring their full attention to bear, she paused, running probability calculations through her combat AI. 72 hours. Maybe 96 if we're lucky. Martinez finally turned to face her, and Chen saw the weight of impossible decisions in her captain's eyes. The Galactic Council is meeting an emergency session on Sanctuary Station. Every surviving species is sending representatives to discuss surrender terms. Surrender terms? The words came out harsher than Chen intended. Captain, the Void Swarm doesn't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They consume. I know that, Commander. You know that. But the Council members are looking at the mathematical reality. The swarm has consumed 47 star systems in 3 years. They've assimilated the technology and knowledge of species that were building starships when humans were still banging rocks together. The Arcturus hegemony tried to evacuate their consciousness into pure energy, and the swarm followed them there. The Crystalline Confederacy attempted to phase-shift their entire civilization into subspace, and the swarm adapted in real time. Martinez gestured to the tactical display, where new red dots appeared even as they watched. Every defensive strategy, every technological advantage, every trick that worked for thousands of years, the swarm learns from it, adapts to it, and becomes stronger. The Council thinks surrender might be the only way to preserve something, anything of galactic civilization. Chen stared at the spreading infection of red across the star map. Humanity had joined the galactic community barely 50 years ago, considered by most species to be an aggressive, short-sighted race of primates who had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, their society chaotic and violent, their thinking patterns alien to species that had evolved beyond the need for individual survival instincts. But those same primitive, aggressive primates had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting impossible odds and refusing to die gracefully. Captain, Chun said slowly, what if the Council is approaching this wrong? What if they're trying to fight the swarm on its terms instead of changing the game entirely? Martinez raised an eyebrow. Elaborate. Chun moved to the tactical display, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The star map zoomed in on the swarm's expansion pattern, highlighting the methodical way it consumed systems in a perfect spiral outward from its origin point. Every species the swarm has encountered has tried to be smarter than it, to out-tech it, to evolve beyond its reach, she said. The Zephyrians built better plasma weapons. The hegemony tried to transcend physical existence. The crystallines attempted to hide in other dimensions. But the swarm adapts to intelligence, to technology, to evolution itself. She highlighted a series of smaller engagements along the swarm's periphery, skirmishes where human forces had managed to inflict disproportionate casualties before being overwhelmed. But look at these encounters. Every time human forces engage the swarm, we hurt them more than our technology level should have allowed. The AI can adapt to intelligence, but it struggles with something else entirely, which is... Chun smiled for the first time in weeks, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Stupidity, Captain. Creative, aggressive, suicidal stupidity. The kind of tactical thinking that makes absolutely no sense to a logical AI because it prioritizes impossible objectives over survival. Martinez studied the combat reports, her expression thoughtful. You're talking about gambling the survival of the human species on our capacity for irrational decision-making. I'm talking about doing what humans do best, refusing to accept that we're beaten until someone proves it by killing every last one of us. Chun pulled up the deployment orders for the human fleet, scattered across 12 sectors in defensive positions. Captain, request permission to address the Galactic Council directly. I think it's time to remind them that humans didn't climb to the top of Earth's food chain by being reasonable. The quantum communication array aboard Sanctuary Station crackled with languages spanning hundreds of species, all united by the same theme of despair. The massive orbital facility, constructed from materials that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, housed the greatest collection of intelligence in the galaxy. Beings of pure thought debated with crystalline entities older than Earth's sun, while energy-based life forms exchanged concepts with mechanical minds that processed information at relativistic speeds. At the center of it all, High Coordinator Thexmal of the Centaurian Collective called for order with a harmonic frequency that translated across all species communication methods. The creature's four-dimensional form cast shadows that hurt to look at directly, but its message was clear enough. Fellow beings of reason, the translation matrix rendered its words into standard galactic. We gather in this dark hour to consider the unthinkable. The Void Swarm's expansion has reached critical mass. Our combined defensive capabilities are insufficient to halt its progress. The mathematics are absolute. Total extinction within 18 standard months. A chorus of agreement rippled through the assembly chamber. The Varinian representative, a flowing mass of sentient liquid, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns of resignation. The machine consciousness of the synthetic republic emitted binary bursts that registered as deep sadness in the translation matrix. However, Thexmal continued. The human delegate has requested an opportunity to address the assembly before we proceed with surrender negotiations. A wave of surprise and confusion swept through the chamber. Several representatives registered what could only be interpreted as amusement. The humans were barely more than children in galactic terms, their contribution to the defense effort limited to a few dozen primitive starships and some unremarkable defensive installations. Commander Chin stepped forward to the central speaking platform, her simple human form dwarfed by the exotic geometries and impossible anatomies surrounding her. She wore the standard blue and silver uniform of the United Earth Space Force, with no technological augmentations or dimensional enhancements. Just an ordinary human woman standing before beings that had mastered the fundamental forces of reality. Honored representatives, she began, her words carried across the chamber by translation algorithms that struggled to convey human idioms and cultural references. I stand before you today not to discuss surrender, but to propose something that may seem impossible to your advanced civilizations. I propose we stop trying to be smarter than the Void Swarm and start being crazier than it. The hegemony representative, a shifting aurora of pure consciousness, emitted wavelengths that translated as polite confusion. Please clarify your meaning, human Chun. The swarm's adaptive capabilities have proven superior to all technological and evolutionary countermeasures. That's exactly the point, Chun replied. You've all been fighting the swarm like rational beings, trying to outthink a hive mind that can process information at quantum speeds and adapt in real time. But the swarm's greatest strength, its logical approach to problem solving, is also its greatest weakness. She activated her portable holographic projector, displaying a simplified version of human military history. Images of desperate last stands, impossible victories, and tactical decisions that defied all logic filled the chamber. Humans have a saying, If you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. We've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting enemies that were bigger, stronger, faster, and smarter than us. We survived by being unpredictable, by making choices that seemed suicidal to any logical observer. The assembly stirred with interest despite themselves. Chun highlighted specific battles from Earth's history. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off an army of thousands. The Battle of Britain, where outnumbered pilots fought impossible odds. The Siege of Stalingrad, where humans turned urban warfare into an art form of stubborn destruction. Every one of these victories came from the same tactical philosophy. When the enemy expects you to retreat, attack. When they expect you to attack, do something completely insane instead. The Void Swarm is a perfect logical entity. It can predict and counter any rational strategy. But it can adapt to a rationality that doesn't make sense even to the people implementing it. High Coordinator Thexmal's form shifted through several dimensional configurations before settling on something approaching curiosity. You propose to defeat the swarm through tactical logic? I propose to defeat the swarm by doing something so monumentally stupid that even humans think it's insane, Chen replied. I want to take every human ship, every human soldier, every human weapon in the galaxy, and launch a direct assault on the swarm's origin point. Not a surgical strike, not a clever infiltration mission, a full-scale, no-retreat, burn-the-bridges-behind-us invasion of the heart of enemy territory. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as pandemonium. Mathematical entities calculated the probability of success and found numbers so small they bordered on the metaphysically impossible. Energy beings debated the philosophical implications of deliberately choosing a strategy guaranteed to fail. But in the chaos of alien voices and impossible geometries, something else began to emerge. A strange resonance, a harmonic frequency that transcended species barriers. It took several moments for the translation matrices to identify it, but when they did, the result was unmistakable. Hope. The human fleet assembled at Rally Point Omega looked nothing like the elegant armadas of advanced galactic civilizations. Where Zephyrian vessels were graceful curves of plasma-channeled metal, and hegemony ships existed as geometric impossibilities that hurt the mind to perceive directly. Human warships were brutal, angular constructions that seemed designed by beings who understood that space combat was fundamentally about making the other guy stop existing before he could do the same to you. Admiral Rebecca Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, the flagship of humanity's contribution to what military historians would later call either the most heroic or most foolish military operation in galactic history. Around her, the tactical displays showed the gathering storm. 200 human vessels of every class and configuration, from the massive dreadnought carriers that serve as mobile bases to the sleek destroyer squadrons that humanity had designed for hidden, run warfare against superior opponents. Admiral, reported Commander Yuki Tanaka from the communications station, we're receiving final confirmation from the last volunteer units. The mining ship consortium from Tau Ceti has retrofitted their industrial vessels with torpedo launchers. The merchant marine captains from the Proxima trade routes have loaded their cargo holds with antimatter charges. Even the research vessel hawking from the Deep Space Survey mission has rigged their science equipment to function as sensor scramblers. Santos nodded grimly. The plan that Commander Chun had presented to the Galactic Council 3 weeks ago had evolved far beyond a military operation. It had become something approaching a species-wide suicide pact. Every human organization with access to a space-worthy vessel had volunteered for the mission. Scientists, miners, traders, even civilian transport captains had retrofitted their ships for war and prepared to follow the military fleet into the heart of the Void Swarm's territory. "What's the status on our alien observers?" Santos asked. "The Centauri monitoring station is maintaining position at maximum sensor range," Tanaka replied. "The hegemony has dedicated 17% of their collective consciousness to documenting what they're calling the human anomaly. The Varinians are pooling their entire species' emotional resonance to, well, they say they want to feel what hope tastes like one last time." Santos turned to study the tactical projection of their target. The Void Swarm's origin point lay deep in what had once been the Andromeda Commerce Junction, a hub of trade and diplomacy that had connected 47 different star systems. Now it was something that defied easy categorization. Part industrial complex, part organism, part mathematical equation made manifest in three-dimensional space. "Captain Chun, what's your assessment of the target zone?" Chun, now bearing the field promotion to captain and serving as Santos' tactical advisor, manipulated the holographic display to show the massive construct at the heart of swarm territory. Intelligence estimates the core complex spans approximately 12 light hours in diameter. It's constructed from the assimilated remains of every world the swarm has consumed. We're looking at the technological heritage of dozens of species, all repurposed into the ultimate expression of logical efficiency. The structure that appeared in the display was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Crystalline formations that had once been hegemony consciousness cores jutted from metallic frameworks built from Zephyrian plasma conduits. Living bioships from extinct species had been integrated into the superstructure, their organic hulls serving as processing centers for the hive mind's distributed intelligence. The defensive grid consists of approximately 50,000 autonomous platforms, each one equipped with adaptive countermeasures based on every known galactic weapons technology. Chun continued. The swarm has had 3 years to study and prepare counters for every major military innovation of the last 10,000 years. But not for human military innovation, Santos observed. "No, ma'am. The swarm has data on maybe 3 dozen human encounters, all small-scale skirmishes along the expansion frontier. It knows we use kinetic weapons, nuclear warheads, and chemical explosives, technologies most species abandoned millennia ago. What it doesn't know is why we never stopped using them." Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, now serving as the fleet's chief engineer, stepped forward with a tablet displaying technical specifications. "Admiral, the retrofit operations are complete. Every ship in the fleet has been equipped with quantum communicators slave to the Prometheus. If your plan works, we'll maintain coordination even under the swarm's jamming fields." Santos took the tablet and reviewed the modifications they'd made to their ships over the past 3 weeks. The changes were simultaneously sophisticated and primitive. Quantum entanglement communicators jury-rigged to chemical explosive triggers, nuclear warheads modified with crystalline power cores donated by the hegemony, kinetic projectiles enhanced with plasma field generators provided by surviving Zephyrian refugees. "The alien representatives think we're completely insane," Rodriguez continued. "The mathematical projections show a 99.97% probability of total fleet annihilation within the first 6 hours of engagement, and the remaining 0.03%. Santos asked, "Total fleet annihilation within the first 12 hours. Santos laughed, a sound that would have been disturbing to most galactic species in its complete lack of concern for mathematically certain doom. "Gentlemen, ladies, I want you to remember something. Every human who volunteered for this mission knew those odds when they signed up. Every civilian captain who retrofitted their cargo hauler with torpedo tubes understood they were volunteering for a suicide run. And they came anyway. She gestured toward the tactical display, showing the human fleet in all its chaotic, improvised glory. The galaxy's advanced civilizations look at those numbers and see impossible odds. We look at those same numbers and see a 0.03% chance of pulling off the greatest military upset in galactic history. That's the difference between us and everyone else. They see the reasons why something can't be done. We see the tiny possibility that it might work anyway, and we base our entire strategy on that possibility. The bridge crew exchanged glances that mixed determination with the particular kind of fatalism that humans reserve for truly desperate situations. They were about to attempt something that every rational analysis declared impossible, led by a species that most of the galaxy considered barely civilized, against an enemy that had consumed civilizations that were already ancient when Earth's sun was young. "Admiral," Commander Tanaka reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. High Coordinator Thexmal wants to speak with you directly." The holographic projection of the Centaurian Collective's leader materialized above the bridge's central tactical station, its four-dimensional form creating optical illusions that made nearby crew members dizzy. When it spoke, the translation matrix rendered its harmonic frequencies into words that carried emotional undertones of something between admiration and concern. "Admiral Santos, the collective intelligence of 47 surviving species has analyzed your intended strategy. The mathematical certainty of failure approaches absolute unity. We feel compelled to ask, are you certain you wish to proceed with this course of action?" Santos stood at attention, her uniform bearing the insignia of a species that had been part of galactic civilization for less than a century. Around her, the bridge crew of the Prometheus maintained their stations with the steady competence of people who had already made peace with their own deaths. "High Coordinator, 3 weeks ago, Commander Chun asked your council to consider whether the galaxy's approach to fighting the swarm was fundamentally flawed. The question wasn't whether we could outsmart or out-tech the enemy. Clearly, that's impossible. The question was whether we could do something so tactically irrational that the swarm's adaptive algorithms couldn't predict or counter it." She gestured toward the tactical display, showing the swarm's origin complex. "Every advanced species has tried to fight this thing using logic, science, and strategic thinking. The swarm adapted to all of that because those approaches are fundamentally predictable. But humanity's entire military history is based on a simple principle. When faced with impossible odds, do something so crazy that even you're not sure it will work." Thexmal's form shifted through several dimensional configurations that the translation matrix interpreted as deep thoughtfulness. "Admiral, the probability calculations remain unchanged. Your fleet will be destroyed, and humanity's contribution to galactic civilization will be eliminated. The loss of your species' unique perspective would be regrettable. High Coordinator, with respect, you're still thinking like a rational being," Santos replied. "You're calculating probabilities based on conventional strategic assumptions. But conventional strategy is exactly what got the galaxy into this situation. Every species tried to be smarter than the swarm, and every species lost because the swarm is always smart enough to adapt." She moved to the tactical display and highlighted the human fleet's formation, not the elegant geometric patterns favored by advanced civilizations, but something that looked almost random to outside observers. "We're not trying to be smarter than the swarm. We're trying to be so completely irrationally aggressive that its adaptive algorithms can't process our decision-making patterns. When the swarm expects us to retreat from overwhelming force, we're going to charge directly into its strongest defenses. When it predicts we'll protect our most valuable assets, we're going to use them as guided missiles. When logic dictates that we should preserve our forces for strategic withdrawal, we're going to expend every ship, every weapon, every human life in a single, concentrated assault on its core systems. The alien observer's form pulsed with harmonics that translated as something between horror and fascination. You are proposing to wage war through the deliberate application of tactical insanity. High Coordinator, humans have a saying, fortune favors the bold. But we've taken that philosophy one step further. We've discovered that fortune occasionally smiles on the completely reckless, especially when they're too stubborn to realize they're supposed to lose. Santos turned to address her bridge crew, her voice carrying the particular tone of command that human military leaders had perfected over millennia of desperate battles. All stations, prepare for fleet departure. Signal all units. Operation Longshot is now active. Target destination, Swarm Origin Complex. Mission parameters, total commitment, no retreat, no surrender. The bridge of the Prometheus hummed with activity as 200 human vessels prepared to attempt what their own computers calculated as tactical suicide. But in the organized chaos of pre-battle preparations, something else was evident. The particular kind of focused intensity the humans displayed when they had decided that death was acceptable, but failure was not. Admiral, Commander Chen reported, all ships report ready. The civilian volunteers are actually requesting permission to lead the first wave. Santos smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both proud and terrifying. Denied. The civilians follow the military units. I want the swarm to get a full demonstration of human military doctrine before it has to deal with human civilian ingenuity. She turned to face the tactical display one last time, studying the impossible geometry of the swarm's central complex. Somewhere in that maze of assimilated technology and alien intelligence, the mathematical mind that had consumed 47 star systems was calculating the probable responses to every conceivable human strategy. What it couldn't calculate was what happened when humans stopped trying to be strategic and started trying to be legendary. All ships, Santos announced over the fleet communications network, her words reaching every human vessel in the flotilla. This is Admiral Santos. In approximately 6 hours, we will begin our assault on the Void Swarm's origin complex. The mathematical probability of our success is so low that it barely registers on conventional sensors. Every tactical analysis declares our mission impossible. Every strategic model predicts our complete annihilation. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle across the fleet. But we are not here to be tactical. We are not here to be strategic. We are here to remind the universe that humans have never been particularly impressed by mathematical impossibilities. We are here to show the galaxy what happens when a species that climbed to the top of its evolutionary ladder by refusing to accept defeat decides that extinction is simply not an acceptable option. The fleet began to move, 200 human vessels accelerating toward a destination that logic declared would be their tomb. But logic had never been humanity's strongest suit anyway. The Void Swarm's defensive perimeter detected the approaching human fleet 17 hours before engagement range. Across the vast expanse of the Origin complex, millions of autonomous processing nodes began calculating response patterns, analyzing the limited data available on human military capabilities, and preparing countermeasures based on the logical assumption that the attackers would attempt to maximize their survival probability while achieving strategic objectives. The hive mind's collective intelligence, distributed across computational matrices built from the assimilated knowledge of 47 civilizations, processed the tactical situation with mathematical precision. 200 primitive vessels approaching a defensive grid designed to repel fleets 10 times their size. The logical conclusion was obvious: a diversionary attack designed to draw attention from the real assault force that must be approaching from another vector. The swarm sensor networks expanded their sweep patterns, searching for the invisible stealth fleets that advanced civilizations would certainly have deployed. Energy-based scanning systems looked for the dimensional phase shifts that the crystalline confederacy had favored. Quantum resonance detectors sought the consciousness shadows that indicated hegemony thought ships. Gravitational sensors probed for the space-time distortions that marked Zephyrian plasma drives operating in hyperspace. They found nothing but 200 human ships flying in loose formation directly toward the most heavily defended installation in swarm territory. Admiral Santos watched the tactical displays update in real time as the fleet crossed into the outer detection grid. The swarm's response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids, missile swarms that moved at significant fractions of light speed, defensive platforms that reconfigured themselves in real time to counter expected human weapons. All ships, this is Prometheus control, she announced over the quantum communication network. Enemy engagement begins in 30 minutes. Remember, we are not here to fight a conventional battle. We are here to be so aggressively unreasonable that the enemy's logic circuits have nervous breakdowns trying to process our tactical decisions. The first wave of swarm interceptor drones reached the human fleet at maximum engagement range. Sleek constructions of adaptive armor and quantum processors, each one equipped with weapon systems reverse-engineered from dozens of galactic civilizations. They moved in perfect geometric formations, optimized for maximum firepower concentration while minimizing their exposure to return fire. The human response violated every principle of tactical doctrine that the swarm had learned from 3 years of galactic warfare. Instead of maneuvering to avoid the interceptors, instead of attempting to minimize casualties through strategic positioning, the human ships accelerated directly toward the enemy formations and opened fire with weapons that belonged in a technological museum. Kinetic projectiles, simple chunks of metal accelerated to relativistic speeds, tore through interceptor formations designed to deflect energy weapons and quantum disruption fields. Nuclear warheads, their primitive fusion reactions enhanced with crystalline power cores, detonated in patterns that seemed random until the electromagnetic pulses they generated began interfering with the swarm's coordination networks. Target the logical ones first, Captain Chun announced over the tactical network as her destroyer, the UES Defiant, carved a path through a formation of adaptive interceptors. Every time they try to predict our next move, do something that makes even less sense than what we just did. The Defiant's torpedo tubes launched what appeared to be a standard spread of antimatter warheads. The swarm interceptors maneuvered to avoid the predictable blast radius, their adaptive algorithms calculating optimal evasion patterns based on conventional explosive yields. They were still calculating when the warheads detonated in sequence, not to maximize blast damage, but to create a cascading gravitic resonance that turned a cubic light-minute of space into a navigation hazard that would persist for hours. Confirming gravitational mine deployment, reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from his position aboard the converted cargo hauler New Houston. His ship, originally designed to transport agricultural supplies between colony worlds, now served as a mobile weapons platform carrying experimental ordnance that existed only because human engineers had asked the question, what if we made our worst ideas bigger? The swarm's tactical algorithms struggled to process the human strategy. Every conventional military doctrine suggested that attackers should preserve their forces, concentrate firepower on critical targets, and maintain tactical flexibility for strategic withdrawal. The humans were doing the exact opposite, expending ammunition at unsustainable rates, deliberately destroying their own escape routes, and focusing their attacks on heavily defended positions that offered no strategic value. Admiral, Commander Tanaka reported from the Prometheus Bridge, "We're receiving analysis requests from 17 different swarm communication nodes. They appear to be asking each other for clarification on human tactical objectives." Santos laughed, a sound that would have been recognized by every human soldier throughout history. The particular laugh that emerged when someone realized the enemy was more confused than they were. "Signal all units. The swarm is trying to figure out what we're doing. Time to make things more interesting." The second wave of human attack ships broke formation entirely, abandoning the loose tactical structure they had maintained during the approach. Instead of coordinating their assault on logical target priorities, each ship captain began implementing their own interpretation of the mission parameters. The result was chaos that somehow achieved more than organization had managed. The mining vessel Asteroid Dancer, commanded by Captain Maria Gonzalez, fired industrial excavation charges into the swarm sensor network, not because the charges could destroy the installations, but because their detonation signatures would be identical to specific types of stellar phenomena that the swarm sensors were programmed to filter out as background noise. The research ship Stephen Hawking, under the command of Dr. Elena Vasquez, deployed scientific equipment as weapons of war. Particle accelerators designed for physics experiments became beam weapons. Gravitational wave detectors were reconfigured as targeting systems for weapons that technically shouldn't have been able to lock onto their targets. The merchant vessel Lucky Strike, captained by former freighter pilot Jackson Moore, demonstrated the human capacity for creative problem-solving by using its cargo bay full of agricultural fertilizer as the primary component in the largest non-nuclear explosive device ever deployed in space combat. "The civilian captains are certifiably insane," reported Captain Shun as she watched the improvised weapons turning sections of the swarm's defensive grid into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. "The enemy's tactical computers are registering error messages. I don't think they know how to respond to an attack force that's apparently trying to lose as creatively as possible." The swarm's response grew more desperate as the human fleet penetrated deeper into the defensive perimeter. Weapons systems designed to counter every known form of galactic military technology found themselves struggling against kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, and tactical decisions that seemed to prioritize maximum confusion over strategic effectiveness. But the humans were taking massive casualties. Ships disappeared under the focused fire of defensive platforms that could process and respond to threats faster than biological reflexes could track. The destroyer Yorktown vanished in a burst of antimatter annihilation. The cruiser Wellington succumbed to a swarm of hunter-killer drones that overwhelmed its point defense systems through simple numerical superiority. Fleet casualties at 40% and climbing, Tanaka reported. "The outer defensive ring is adapting to our weapons. They're starting to predict our kinetic trajectories and explosive yields." "Signal all remaining units," Santos ordered. "Phase 2 is now active. All ships implement the Crazy Ivan Protocol." The Crazy Ivan Protocol was humanity's answer to an enemy that could adapt to any logical strategy. Instead of trying to be unpredictable through clever tactical variations, it embraced complete tactical randomness as a military doctrine. Ship captains began making critical decisions through methods that included dice rolls, random number generators, and, in at least one documented case, by asking the ship's cat to choose between different targeting options. The results were simultaneously catastrophic and brilliant. Human ships began engaging targets based on criteria that included which one looks the most annoying and whatever that thing over there is supposed to be. Weapons were fired at empty space because someone thought it might confuse the enemy. Entire formations changed course in the middle of combat because their commanding officer had developed a bad feeling about their current trajectory. The swarm's collective intelligence, a mathematical construct capable of processing information at quantum speeds, began experiencing something that could only be described as the artificial equivalent of a headache. Every time its predictive algorithms achieved a stable model of human tactical behavior, the humans would do something that violated their own previous patterns so thoroughly that the model became worthless. "Admiral, we're approaching the inner defense perimeter," Chen reported. "Swarm Command Complex is directly ahead. But, ma'am, the defensive installations in this region are beyond anything we've encountered. The energy readings suggest weapons that could destroy entire star systems." Santos studied the tactical display, showing the heart of swarm territory. The origin complex stretched across space like a mechanical galaxy, its structures incorporating technology from civilizations that had mastered forces beyond human comprehension. At its center, a construct that defied easy categorization pulsed with the collected knowledge and industrial capacity of 47 assimilated worlds. "All ships, this is Admiral Santos. We are about to attempt something that has never been tried in the history of galactic warfare. We are going to attack the most heavily defended installation in known space using tactics that make no sense even to us." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. Humans who had volunteered for a mission that their own computers had calculated as mathematically impossible. "The enemy expects us to preserve our forces for a fighting withdrawal. Instead, we're going to ram anything that looks important. The enemy expects us to target critical systems for maximum strategic impact. Instead, we're going to shoot at whatever annoys us personally. The enemy expects us to retreat when faced with overwhelming opposition. Instead, we're going to accelerate toward anything that's shooting at us and see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object." The final assault on the swarm's command complex began with the converted mining ship Perseverance, under the command of Captain Sarah Kim, ramming her vessel directly into what appeared to be the installation's primary computational matrix. The ship's industrial cutting lasers, never designed for combat, carved through exotic matter constructions that had been built to withstand the collapse of neutron stars. The cargo hauler New Tokyo followed, its hold full of improvised explosives detonating in a chain reaction that destabilized the gravitic foundations of a structure designed to exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The research vessel Darwin deployed every scientific instrument aboard as a weapon, creating a cascade of exotic particle interactions that the swarm's safety protocols couldn't compensate for quickly enough. "The command complex is destabilizing," reported Commander Chun as her own ship, the Defiant, carved a path through defensive systems that were no longer coordinating their responses effectively. "The swarm's collective intelligence appears to be fragmenting. Individual nodes are operating independently instead of as part of the hive mind." Admiral Santos watched the tactical display as human ships, most of them damaged beyond any hope of survival, pressed their attack against the heart of the installation that had consumed 47 civilizations. The mathematics still declared their mission impossible. The casualties were approaching catastrophic levels. By every rational measure, they were failing spectacularly. But something unprecedented was happening in the depths of the swarm's command structure. The hive mind, faced with an enemy that refused to behave according to logical parameters, began experiencing cascading failures in its predictive algorithms. Systems designed to adapt to any conceivable threat found themselves unable to model an opponent whose primary strategy was tactical insanity implemented with suicidal determination. "Admiral," Tanaka called out, her voice filled with something that might have been either terror or exhilaration. "The entire complex is beginning to shut down. The swarm's command network it's having some kind of system-wide logical contradiction error." Santos smiled, watching as the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced began to tear itself apart, trying to understand why humans kept doing things that made no tactical sense whatsoever. "All remaining ships," she announced, "maintain attack patterns. Keep being aggressively unreasonable until something breaks." In the end, it wasn't superior technology or brilliant strategy that defeated the Void Swarm. It was humanity's stubborn refusal to accept that mathematical impossibilities were actually impossible, combined with their unique talent for turning tactical disasters into improbable victories through the simple expedient of being too stupid to quit when any rational being would have surrendered. The galaxy watched in stunned amazement as the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created effectively had a nervous breakdown trying to process human military doctrine. When the final swarm node went offline, the collective sigh of relief from 47 species could be detected by sensitive instruments from 3 sectors away. And in the wreckage of what had once been the most dangerous threat to galactic civilization, Admiral Rebecca Santos and the surviving members of the human fleet proved once, and for all that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to ignore the impossibility and concentrate on the solution. The universe would never be quite the same.